what I find most empowering, and I don't know if you are familiar with some of the concepts of neuroscience, is that until 10, 20 years ago, it was believed that we were given a brain when we were born, very much like this skull in a museum, and that we would take that brain with us for the rest of our lives. And we talk about talent that is given and gifts. And so these definitions leave very little room for empowerment and feeling that actually you can change some of the talents that you've been given, or build ones that you didn't think you had been given at all. So this given quantity qualities of the brain doesn't just apply to creativity. It applies, for instance, we know about the IQ test. Some of you may have done it. And in the past, it was done once in the life because it was thought that you either had a certain intelligence or you didn't. But actually now it has been found that that IQ can change with life, depending on what conditions we do it under, what have we been doing just before taking that test. Of course, not just before, but in the months and the years just before that. And that is the real empowering point that this takes us to. And on the next slide, actually, I have been reading a lot about what happens, why, because if you look at how children are brought up, and if you have children yourself, or, perhaps through family, that there is no doubt in this world that they are creative. They manifest it from the first moment they are born. And actually, when they are born, there are no parts of the brain that are the logical, rational parts. Everything is creativity, is an explosion of color and creativity. And then as they grow up, the first phase is when they go through toddler years. And then as they go between 7 and 14-year-olds, what is examined on the brain is that the rational and logical part takes over more and more. There are some exceptions, of course, of kids that are really interested in music and art and really pursue it. But if you don't have those specific interests and you pursue them, generally, between the impact that parents have, the schools have, the other family members have, and society overall, we channel children to use their creativity less and less, to the point that it almost cannot be traced anymore, that part, when in some kids, when they turn between 7 and 14-year-olds. And then, but of course, what we can actually do is, what we know now through neuroscience, is that we can reverse that trend. So not only, first of all, we need to have that awareness since children are very little on what we're channeling them into, but also the fact that it doesn't matter if we were born with a certain given quantity of creativity and other intelligence or problem solving skills or other even life skills. It's always in our power to change the way our brain is structured. Of course, the later we leave it, the worse. And the best way I can describe this is that when we have a habit, that habit creates like a little line, as if you were kind of cutting something. And the more we do one thing, the deeper that line is. So if we're trying to reverse it, it will take longer, as if we were trying to fill that little line again. But it certainly can be done, and it can be done up to until we die. And the brain of meditators, for instance, has been studied at depth to show what changes in the brain happens after 1 year of meditation, after 6 months of meditation, after 5 years, 10 years, or 20 years of meditation. And the results show that each length of time brings its own results in terms of this rewiring of the brain. And next, Scott. This principle has been widely used, especially to address addictions, for instance. So unless, some people go into a check-in into a clinic and, to stop alcohol addiction or drug addiction. Some other people use patches. But when we take those measures, we only work on the end symptom, on the end result. We try and stop a habit, just working on the actual habit itself, but not on the mental thoughts and condition that existed on that. Whilst what neuroscience teaches is that we can actually rewire our brain to stop those impulses to smoke, to drink, in a way that is much more long-term and actually much more cost-effective, because you don't have to pay for expensive treatments to do that. You have all the power in your own head. Moving on to the next one. So creativity, like any other mental function that you want to try and cultivate, is a muscle. And the example that I normally give is that when we're born, we don't really have much muscle. We go to the gym, we start practicing, we start exercising, whatever exercise we choose to do, and we expect that with time we will get muscles and we will build that muscle shape. However, we're not as orientated when it comes to our brain, our mental functions, and also when it comes to our emotions. We expect that something either is given to us or not, but there is no difference really. Just like body muscle, creativity or any other mental functions can be worked on and increased with constant effort. Next one. And I know you probably have heard of something called the law of attraction. People have been talking about the power of thinking and the power that positive thinking can have on us and on how we feel, how we face the world, whether we fear the word or world, or we approach it with almost kind of a scary attitude. And the truth behind this is again proven by science. So it is not just a nice Eastern philosophy. It is now been proven by many scientific studies that positive thinking has a positive impact on us. There is a book that is actually called The Body Keeps the Score, that talks about how thinking and actions, and we're going to talk about actions in a second, have an impact on our subconscious because they create a memory in our body. So, if you think about trauma, like something traumatic happens to you, your body records it. And every time you are faced with a situation that reminds you of that trauma, it triggers the same reaction in you, even if the event is not actually happening. The same thing happens with thinking. So if we constantly think negatively, our body has registered that negativity and that emotion. And next time, anything will trigger us in that way, even if the event, for instance, if we think negatively about a job interview that we are about to have, or a meeting that we have with our boss or with someone else, a conversation with our partner, if we already thinking negatively about that, then our body has registered that and will react in a way that is certainly not conducive to creating a positive outcome. So positive thinking actually works on our subconscious to make us feel better and actually creating more positive conditions in our life. And if we go on to the next slide, we wanted to actually go a little deeper with this because, as I mentioned earlier, some of you might have heard of the law of attraction, and what the law of attraction has done has spread in the Western world the power of positive affirmations. So maybe you've heard a little bit about this, but some people, or many people I speak to actually, dread them. They find them almost cringing. They can't bear the thought of looking at themselves in the mirror and talking to themselves. But I promise you get used to it very quickly. There's something really, really relieving to be able to repeat stuff loud to yourself, and very empowering, especially when you know that actually they work. Now, the reason why some people find it very challenging is because actually many people don't know how to do them correctly and why we do them in this way. So we're going to talk about the steps now, so that you can be a bit more confident in the way that you structure your own affirmations. First of all, we start with the words I am, and we talk in the present because we want to trick the brain to thinking that that situation is already happening. If you position it in the future, it just doesn't feel tangible enough. And it feels like it's something that it could happen one day rather than a reality that could come through right now. We include an action word, so a verb ending in ing, like living, being. We also state it in the positive. Again, because with affirmations, we trick our subconscious. If we state it in the negative, like I want to stop smoking, or I don't want to be fat, and like anything framed in that way, it connects your subconscious to the negative side of it, which we don't want to do. So always stated in the positive of what you want to achieve. We make it as specific and as short as possible. So it doesn't have to be super short, something that you can remember. At the beginning, you can read them to yourself, so you can have them on your phone or on a little booklet that you keep next to your bed. So you read them in the morning before going to bed, and then at some point you will hopefully memorize them quite easily. And then one very important point, which is one that is pretty much 99% of the times always missed out, which is including an emotion and a feeling. And sometimes the emotion and the feeling is included, but people don't feel it. And it's very important in these things that you actually feel that sensation in the body. We talked about earlier how trauma or positive things create a groove in your body. And the way they do that is working through your emotions. So if you don't find a way in through your emotions, nothing is going to go to your subconscious. So the emotion is the actual carrier of your affirmation to your subconscious. So let's make this practical. So there's an example that we have shared, the beginning part, that you can take some time to complete or rewrite. So the example is, I am so happy and grateful that I am living. And, for instance, one of mine at the moment, since we've been confined in the home, is to actually have more space, to be living in the countryside, in a bigger house. And those can be as practical as those, or perhaps wanting to change your tendency to get fearful or to get frustrated. It can be a money related one. So it could be, I am so happy and grateful that I'm now earning X amount of money. I'm so happy and grateful that I'm now doing the job of my dreams. So they can relate to anything from personal traits, growth, financial, job, home situation. And so you can see all those 5 elements that we talked about. I am, and then happy and grateful are the emotions and feelings. It's specific, stated in the positive, and there is an action word ending in ing. And, as I mentioned, you need to feel it. So it needs to be something that you feel, that you can see yourself. There is a visualization element that you can add to it. Visualize yourself actually being in that situation. And that generally creates an emotion quite easily. So we're going to give some time. Scott, this is the right time, right? To give people some time?
So please, everyone, start with writing your own affirmations. We had a question come in as well, so maybe we can chat that through while we allow people some time. So the question is, what would be your recommendation in terms of the number of affirmations? Is it best to have just one or multiple? And what is a good way to remember them or remember a time to repeat them?
Okay, so I generally recommend not to have more than 3, especially when you start. And 3 are good enough, because when we talk about in a bit, there's an action that goes into this as well. You can't just repeat things and hope that, and that's it, sitting in our cave in isolation. Even though we are in isolation, we're not quite in a cave. We're still in the world. So it is important to make them so that you can actually then action as well. So I would say I generally work with 3. And sometimes even with 1, if I have one that in that period is predominant for me, I just focus on that one. But I would say 1 to 3 is a good number. I always say that this works best when in the morning or evenings. And that's not because, you necessarily need to be a morning person or, whatever time you wake up. But when you are in those phases, so especially when you wake up, you are not in theta brain waves. So you're still in a half waves, which basically means that you're just coming out of sleep. Your brain is not on a logic, rational mechanic already going, which means that you have a quicker route to your subconscious. And that's why sometimes, hypnosis can work so well, because it gets you in that state, and then things get pushed through to your subconscious through that hypnosis practice. So I would say, yes, moments where it's very difficult to do it mid-morning, for instance, when you are, working, and then you really need to do a lot of work to stop your brain, do a meditation before, do some breathing, relax, and then do your affirmations.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I found it really beneficial to do as soon as I wake up. I think it's another reason why they encourage us not to look at our phone first thing, because you wake up and suddenly you're having all this external stimuli, whereas this could be really beneficial. You wake up, maybe you do a bit of meditation in bed, or you just lie there and you think about your positive affirmations, and actually that's how you start your day, and that's how you bring the energy with you that you want to create. And that's been a really good journey for me.